Hey folks, welcome back for more inZOI updates. As some of you may know, the inZOI team featured inZOI in inZOI land. Sorry. I don't know why I'm stumbling over myself. Anyways, Gamescom is a gaming convention that was held in Germany, recently passed in August. You know it. Anyways, inZOI, the inZOI team, they were there, and I have a script, okay, and for whatever reason, I can't get the words from my brain out of my mouth onto the mic. Ever have that? Ever have performance anxiety? I don't know why. I want to share a lot of things with you right now, but I am not in the right state of mind. Anyways, we're talking about inZOI, not my mental health. So the inZOI team, they showed off the latest build of the game, they showed off character customization, they had memorabilia for people to get, and they did interviews with other content creators. It was pretty much a, here we are, take a stand. It was their coming to Jesus moment. Now, inZOI was there and they met with a lot of people and it was a huge showcase of their game. But what's more important there, I think, at least for me, was an interview done by the lead producer, lead developer, Hyungjun. And I apologize if I just butchered his name there, but he had plenty to share that I thought was really insightful. Now, before I share some of my thoughts, I want to give a special thank you to YouTuber Simmer Erin. She covers a host of life sim games ranging from The Sims to the then Life by You, Paralives, inZOI, and more. I'm a subscriber of hers, and she actually dropped this video, and when I saw it, I was really eager to hear what she had to say. I just wanted to cover a bit more topics in my video, but her work was definitely inspiration for this video. Just as a gentle reminder, for everything that I talk about here that is sourced, I'll go ahead and link it in the description below. So before I get started as well, I also kind of wanted to talk about Hyungjun. Oftentimes, a big game like inZOI, and I call it a big game because they are backed by Krafton, and Krafton is a really big development company. So despite inZOI really having, like, I guess you could say, humble beginnings in the sense that, you know, it's a vision of trying to take on the life sim genre, it's not necessarily a small company, or at least the inZOI team is backed by a big company. So it's kind of refreshing to have a spokesperson who is like down to earth and openly talks about where they see their game. And the reason why I bring that up is, aside from EA, like EA could never be that interpersonal, but most gaming companies that are at this scale normally aren't. Here in this interview, you really get a sense that this is, you know, what he said he was. Like, he says he played The Sims for a long time and he's a simmer at heart, and it's what inspired him to make his own game. I would really be interested in his personal journey, like how he got started and was able to get Krafton on board to even create a life sim game. That would be interesting to me. So I just really wanted to read this as well, just to give you an idea of the person that we're talking to. The interviewer asks, "How do you feel about hosting the first global demo for inZOI?" He responds, "It's a mix of excitement and nervousness. After the overwhelming response we received at the G-Star level last year, the expectations have definitely grown. There's some anxiety about competing on the global stage with other fantastic titles, but I'm thrilled that our team is hard at work and is finally being able to showcase worldwide. While inZOI is still rough around the edges and has areas that need improvement, I hope players see its potential and remember that it's a project worth following." Now, this is translated, so we're not getting a direct text, and we might miss out on tonality as well as some context, you know, as what happens sometimes with translations. But one thing that I find fascinating is that he says, you know, it's a mix of excitement and nervousness. And I think one of the key things to keep in mind is that this is nearly running side by side of when content creators are actually showcasing the alpha footage of the game. So can you imagine, right? Like, you're developing a game, you have to go to Gamescom, you have to get a lot of that stuff in order to make sure that the event really runs well and that your game is seen in the best light. Simultaneously, you got content creators making videos of the alpha footage in the game, and there were optimization issues, there were bugginess issues, there was a lot of questions happening, a lot of advice from the community, a lot of scrutiny in the community in some ways. And all of this is happening, and you're at Gamescom, you know, trying to hold the fort down in that way, over in Germany, no less. You're at a different place trying to showcase your game. It must have been such a surreal experience. And to go back to what I was saying earlier, it's like refreshing to hear someone kind of confess about that. But I think one of the key statements was at the end of that, which is, I hope players see its potential and remember that it's a project worth following. The reason why I think that's a very key line is because we also need to be reasonable with our expectations, in the sense that the game is not out yet. Now, there's a lot of like different critiques that I am seeing online that are surfacing right now, especially when it comes to inZOI and its gameplay, as well as specs and optimization. I'm seeing a lot of critique happening there. But I think what's important for us to understand or to remind ourselves is that this game is not out. I think sometimes what gets lost in the conversation is that we just assume after seeing alpha footage, I mean, even prior to that, where we've seen trailers, right? We make the assumption that this game is going to be this way forever. I think it's important for us to remind ourselves information about this game is still developing, one thing. Two, the game itself is still developing. There's so many games out there, whether they be in early access or even just concept demos or even just trailers, that are not held to the same degree of scrutiny that inZOI seems to be getting right now. There's no way of knowing until it's actually out and has matured. And when I mean out, I don't mean early access, by the by, because here's my thing. I feel when the game comes out in early access, people are already going to have pretty set in stone ideas of how the game is and how it cannot evolve. We'll talk about that later as this interview progresses, because there's a couple of things that relate to that point. But what I'm getting at is when he says, I hope players see its potential and remember that it's a project worth following. That's an important thing to note, to understand that this game is still at its infancy. So here's another question that I thought was pretty interesting when it comes to feedback. And so this kind of relates to what I was mentioning earlier about there's so many things happening, there's a lot of information given to him. What's going on with all that feedback? The interviewer asked, you've emphasized communication with players in the past. Have you incorporated that feedback from the G-Star demo into the current build? So I think this can actually relate to a broad view of just how their game is being perceived in general, as a lot of their alpha footage is being showcased. But he answers, from a content perspective, there's a significant expansion since G-Star last year, which is another convention, by the by. For instance, Bliss Bay, inspired by American Santa Monica, is 2 to 3 times larger than Dongwon, which is based in Korea. We've greatly enhanced character customization features and added new content like city building, AI integrated object, and texture creation, and AI driven stories. One thing that sort of stood out to me there was that in the feedback that they were given, he states their reaction to that feedback was to enhance character customization features, add new content like city building, add AI integrated object and texture creation, and AI story driven dialogue. Honestly, with the reputation that AI has, I'm gonna just go on a whim here and say a lot of the AI integration object, texture creation, AI driven story was perhaps from like a different category of people who were bringing that up. Perhaps they were already working with AI in general, and the feedback was you can use AI in this way to enhance your gameplay. But one thing that does strike me as a little odd was that in response to feedback, they've greatly enhanced character customization features and added new content like city building. Now, I'm gonna just get the city building portion out of the way. What's that? Because from the alpha footage that we've seen, we didn't really see city building. Now, I do also want to give the benefit of the doubt here with this interview and be really charitable, because this is a translated interview. I believe it's a translated interview because it's written down. It's not a video. I'm not sure if this is what it actually means, city building, because we haven't seen city building, not even in the alpha stage. What we have seen is city modification, like modifying, if it's modifying pollution, modifying health, modifying traffic. We're starting to see a lot of that in the gameplay footage, but as far as like city building, like Sim City or city skylines, like that's city building. So I'm very interested to know and have that expanded upon. At any rate, a key thing that I want to talk about in this question was we've greatly enhanced character customization features. Now, this has been a hotly debated topic even at the conception of inZOI. Should this game truly be a life sim game? There should be a variety of different representation when it comes to that. Now, The Sims 4, especially The Sims 4, has been on the frontier of a lot of that. It's a great thing that they've incorporated that feedback. But as a side note, I am curious, had they not gotten that feedback, or had they been ignorant to a lot of that criticism, what would have been the initial vision for inZOI? Just a side thought. Anyways, another really good question that I wanted to take apart was, are there any new cities or content being unveiled at Gamescom, perhaps inspired by Germany or Europe? He answers, last year we introduced Dongwon, inspired by Korea. This year we've added Bliss Bay, based on the US, We've currently considered creating a city inspired by Europe in the future. When developing Bliss Bay, we focused on accurately reflecting the culture and the lifestyle of the region. We've conducted extensive research, consulted with Krafton's overseas offices, and even hired locals to ensure authenticity. Well, I didn't get my email. I'm from here. So anyways, Google Maps was an invaluable tool as well in the process. It was particularly rewarding to hear from a YouTuber living in the region that served as a model for Bliss Bay. Oh, so they did contact a content creator who said the city felt, quote unquote, spot on. Did they now? Did they? No, I will say, like, it did, like, the way the houses look, it's pretty accurate. I will give it that. Look, I'm a local to the area. You know, I'm not a transplant. I'm not rich or anything. Like, literally, we can only, me and my peoples, like, we can only, or my fellow brokies, we can only really visit our own local areas, you know, from time to time. But from what we've seen, from what I've seen, yo, it's pretty accurate. If you guys remember from the demo, if you had an opportunity to play it, and unfortunately, I don't have any footage of it now, but after you get past the character creation screen, they show you the different areas of where you can live. The 3 areas that are highlighted is the Southeast Asian city, potentially, the Korean-based one, and the SoCal one. What I find interesting on that map, however, is that it's a really big map, and that there are some text, again, like I don't have footage of it, but if there is one floating online, you can actually see that there are areas in the world that look like they might be other cities, which I find really fascinating that they've included a lot of that as sort of hints of what's to come. And it does seem like there might be a European-based city, and there might be other, you know, cities based on different areas of other cultures. So I just see no reason why that wouldn't also be included in inZOI. Now, here's another thing that is more focused on gameplay. The question asks, could you update us on the development of features like cars, group activities, reputation systems, city editing, and photo modes that were previously teased? I think this question is really crucial in terms of elaboration, because from what we've seen of the alpha gameplay footage, while conceptually a lot of that was there, it wasn't as fleshed out or in depth. Now, that might be due to the builds that were offered to content creators to showcase, and that the builds that the developers are playing on now is much different. Hard to tell, hard to say. However, I find his answer to this quite illuminating. So here it is. Most of these features, including the car and city traffic systems, group activities, reputation, which is karma in their game, photo studio, and photo mode, are nearly complete and are currently undergoing final polishing. Now, I'm gonna be a little critical here and pretty much say, I hope that's I hope that's not right. Okay, what do I mean by that? Again, the only information that we can really go on is what has been shown to us. Now, it's not clear, again, like I mentioned earlier, what build the content creators were playing on versus the build that is currently being worked on now by the development team. So, from what I have seen initially from the gameplay footage, is that the ideas and concepts are there, but it's still really, like, and I'm gonna go beyond here, okay? Like, I'm not talking about bugs or optimization. I'm not even talking about animation rigging. I'm not talking about a lot of the different things that people might look at on the surface level and be like, oh, why isn't the cat animation done? You know, when you feed the cat and the cat just like stands upright or whatever, like why are there bugs still in the game? Why isn't the game running that well? Like, all of that should be, the operative word being should be, ironed out as the game develops. But what I'm getting at is that I have serious concerns about some of the game's mechanics. For example, like, what is the key difference from clicking a button that says we automatically drive to a job versus you driving to your job in terms of time? Like, what is time like? Is your inZOI more efficient when it comes to getting themselves ready to go to work in the morning versus when a sim does it? Like, there's a lot of these unanswered questions. And what is the city traffic system like? From what we have seen from a lot of the alpha footage, people don't wait in traffic. They just speed past everything. They get on the curb, they get on the pedestrian lane, and they drive as fast as they can to their destination. What is the consequences of that? Are there consequences of that? Because you would imagine if you're trying to replicate a quasi-realistic world, there's going to have to be consequences from driving so recklessly. All that information has not been explored. Perhaps it has, and I would love for you in the comments below to let me know, like, no, that stuff has been showed from this YouTuber on this video, that this is what the time is like for getting ready in the morning and then driving to work, like manually driving to work. And then this is what it's like when they automate to work in terms of time. Like, I would love to hear that kind of information, because as far as including car in the traffic systems, while a very good idea in my opinion, and helps it really stand out, doesn't seem fleshed out to me. It sounds like a gimmick, if I'm being quite honest. Like, oh, we have this feature. Is it useful? Is it gameplay driven? Does it matter in the gameplay mechanics of the entire game? I don't know. Now, I could be wrong, and I'd love to be wrong. I would love the city traffic system and how cars work in the game to be gameplay motivated, and how they work in a secular way that really keeps the gameplay loop going. I would love to know that. I mean, there's no real way to know that until you actually play it, right? But from my just viewing of the game, it doesn't look like that system is fleshed out. Here on this interview, they are saying that it is. I don't know if it is. Another thing is group activities. I didn't see very much of that. I didn't see weddings. I didn't see birthday parties. I didn't see gatherings or, company parties. I didn't see any group activities in that way. Do they mean it do they mean it on a smaller scale? Like, do they mean like hanging out is group activity with a couple of inZOI's, or ZOI's I should say? Do they mean like two kids playing in a playground kind of group activities and making use of that playground? Is that a group activity? As far as group events and activities, that to me is still pretty up in the air. I haven't seen that. Again, if you've seen that footage, please let me know. A game that hasn't been released in early access, and they're saying that they're near final polishing. Does that mean they're near final polishing to get ready for early access, or do they mean they're undergoing final polishing in the sense that, no, this is its completed version? Who's to say? But again, I would always stress to be charitable and open-minded when it comes to a developing game. Again, a game at its infancy. Let's finish what Hyungjun was saying here. On the official inZOI Discord, we've been running a segment called Kajun's Concerns, where I engage with global fans eagerly awaiting the game's release. Through this platform, we've received a wide range of feedback, and we've been deeply moved by the supportive messages that have been given to both me and the development team. A lot of encouragement. That have given me and the development team a lot of encouragement. This is the first time we've worked so closely with our players during development, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the quality of feedback and the creative ideas that people have shared. Ideas that even we as developers hadn't considered, and it's been a joy to exchange thoughts and develop the game together with our community. We've recently wrapped up the first phase of this segment, but we're actively working on incorporating the feedback we've received and preparing to showcase the results. Moving forward, we plan to continue and expand this level of communication with our players. Now, I think a lot of the communication barriers happen because of language, as well as on top of, perhaps Krafton's, policy on what can and can't be shared, as well as their own policies of maybe what they're not ready to share or what they can share. So I think that's a lot. There's like layers to why they have such communication barriers, but as we have seen, they do make a considerable effort to better reflect feedback into their game. Now, I also want to bring up the idea that they've received really supportive messages as well as really high quality feedback. I'm going to make another video about this separately, but I think mainly the community, the inZOI community that's forming now, that's giving them this really high quality feedback, are really just like disillusioned simmers. And the reason why I say that is because some of the feedback that you are seeing right now are things that you just know The Sims 4 would not incorporate, or The Sims 4 would incorporate but then charge you for that incorporation. I mean, what you're seeing now that's being represented in inZOI, there's a lot of features in inZOI, even at the alpha stage, that would be, nickel and dimed out of you from The Sims 4, or has been nickel and dimed in The Sims 4 through multiple DLCs and many different exploitative microtransactions. So like that exists in The Sims 4, and we're seeing some of those gameplay features represented in inZOI as a base game activity. That comes from simmers. It's gotta be, you know, like only a simmer would be like, please add animals and have that be base game. Please add weather and don't charge me for that. Please add seasons and don't charge me for that. And don't like keep digging in my pockets, man. Like only a simmer would say that. A disillusioned one, because fair is fair. There are simmers out there who are just like, no, keep charging me money. I'm a whale and I will give you all my money. Yup. It's really refreshing to hear a dev team, a development lead, you know, to really talk about player feedback in such a positive way that's not just lip service, but actually represented in their game. Now, in the interview, it was also brought up the release date. Like, are you sure? 2024, early access launch. So the question is asked, with the scheduled release date approaching, can you confirm if everything is on track to launch as planned? He responds, developing a new genre of game comes with its challenges, and while delays in hiring developers could have affected our timeline, we've been fortunate to bring on talented team members, and things are progressing smoothly. However, because this genre is quite niche, finding developers with relevant experience has been difficult, and predicting market demands and player expectations has proven to be a significant challenge. That's why we've decided to release the game in early access, even if it's not fully polished, and then continue refining it over time. We're currently targeting a late 2024 early access launch, and the development team is working tirelessly to meet that goal. Okay, there's a lot to break down there, so I'm gonna do my best. I'm really trying to keep this video short.
That was a problem for future me, and now I am future me, and this sucks.
Developing a new genre of game comes with its challenges, and this could be in reference to that Krafton has never done live simming. To be fair, many companies don't even dare take on this challenge because how monumentous it is to even get that stuff going. I am pledged to Paralives right now as a Patreon member, and I mean, you hear the things that they're working on and you're happy that things are progressing over time, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of talented and skillful animators, coders, and it takes a really strong vision. It is a difficult thing to make a live sim. When you consider The Sims in its totality, it has been around for decades. And remember, in a lot of ways, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, but let's be objectively truthful. The Sims 4 was a step backwards for The Sims. If you don't believe me, play The Sims 4 at its launch. All right, you can on Steam, I believe you can go back and do the earliest launch build of The Sims 4. Play that, and you tell me after playing Sims 3 base, Sims 2 base, that the Sims 4 base game is not a step backwards. It is objectively a step backwards. Why am I bringing that up? Because making a life sim game is difficult. Krafton is a company that's now producing inZOI to create a life sim game. They've never made one before. So this is really unique to them. So it's almost really interesting to see them take on a lot of the criticism, and the inZOI team, that is, take on a lot of that criticism in stride as they continue to improve their game. Now, he also mentions, however, because this genre is quite niche, finding developers with relevant experience has been difficult, and predicting market demands and player expectations has proven to be a significant challenge. Isn't that wild? Right? Despite The Sims selling millions and millions and millions of copies, besides so many different gamers from a variety of communities having dipped in The Sims themselves, despite how big and nostalgic The Sims brand is, despite just how big of a footprint The Sims has had in gaming history, the genre is niche. Right? Who would have the audacity to call it niche? But the truth of the matter is, it is niche, like when you think about it, not in the sense that it's a small base of people that play. No, the idea of it being niche is that it's a monopoly. There's only one game out there that has essentially taken up that spot as a life sim game. In that way, it is niche, because The Sims has cornered the market. And so when you find developers with relevant experience, or finding them with relevant experience, is difficult. Because now you're trying to get people who have experience making life sim. What other game at the caliber of The Sims has had developers, excess developers who just come in spares? Could you imagine just being like, I want to find someone with a lot of experience in the life sim genre, and I want them to be part of my development team? What's the pool? What's the development pool like? That's just wild to me, right? Like, what a thought. Another thing is predicting market demands and player expectations has proven a significant challenge. That takes me by surprise a little bit, because again, Kjun, again, I do apologize if I'm butchering his name. By the by, Kjun is sort of the name Hyungjun goes by. Like, that's what he calls himself sometimes. That's why I use that moniker. But he says that he's played The Sims 4 for many, many, many years. So when he states that player expectations has proven to be a significant challenge, a part of me is kind of like, if you're part of the Sims community, you should know the Sims community is the Sims community. Need I say more? At any rate, they say they're still targeting a late 2024 early access launch. I will always say this in every video I make about inZOI, and for every topic that I make regarding its launch date, until it actually launches in late 2024. Never, ever count on that as a reliable launch date. And don't be upset if they push it. Don't be on your high horse and saying, oh, I knew it'll never come out. I hate this game and I hate you, Jan. Because I'll be like, what? Why am I catching strays? But secondly, I'd be like, look, it's a game at its infancy. Now, it's past the conception stage. It's past a lot of its... I'm saying it's like a child. Like, I don't know why I'm talking about this like this. My point being is that don't put pressure on this game that would not exist in other games out there. It's not unheard of that a game is postponed. It's not unheard of that an early access launch date is given and then rescinded. Note that is a date that they're giving you, but it is not a guarantee. So don't be upset. Okay, relax. It's just a game.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
Another thing I want to talk about here is the modding situation that's happening. And so he was asked, there was a lot of buzz around whether inZOI will support mods. Can you share any details on what you're planning in this area? He responds, we understand the importance of modding in the simulation genre, so we've been considering it from the early stages of development. While it's challenging to make every aspect of the game moddable, we're working to open up as many features as possible for customization. There may be some limitations in the initial early access phase, but we're committed to continuously developing the game to allow for more extensive modding options over time. This, I think, is really important. Essentially, from a lot of videos that I've seen of Hyungjun talk about modding, it seems to be a really strong motivator for him in developing inZOI and where they see the future of content represented in inZOI. He's always talked about, like, a game can make a lot of money on its own through the base game, and it can also do well without having to microtransaction or DLC like a nickel and dime a consumer to death. And in all these other interviews, he's always mentioned how modding is so important, because in his perspective, the community that he's seen as he is a simmer himself, can often keep alive a game and keep people coming back to a game if they see strong modding support. Now, this isn't a new idea, by the way. Like, this isn't a stroke of genius or anything. This is very much the reality for a lot of games that exist out there. For example, Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Skyrim, like, these are really dated games. There's so many more instances where you can find where modding essentially not just keeps a game alive, but can resurrect it. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you're in the gamer sphere right now, there's Fallout London that's coming out. Fallout London is a mod. These are just other people creating mods for a game that is how many years old at this point. He sees that as an opportunity for inZOI, and he believes inZOI can have a real footprint because of its modding. And I think, wicked whims aside, I think that is a very positive way of looking about it in terms of how much content can be added into your game if it's content added by a mod versus official content, whatever the inZOI team decides to officially release, versus a mod that already exists. All that gamer spiel. I don't have to harp on that too much. But my point being is that modding is a real key factor in how he sees inZOI's future. It's also worth mentioning inZOI is in partnership with the modding platform CurseForge. From inZOI's perspective, this is to increase modding support and accessibility. The partnership is seen as controversial by many simmers due to Overwolf's ownership of CurseForge. In 2020, the Israeli company Overwolf acquired CurseForge. The partnerships for games span the likes of Minecraft, Ark Survival Ascended, World of Warcraft, and The Sims 4, and many high-profile titles. Suffice it to say, they're a staple in the modding scene. That said, due to Overwolf's association with the Israeli Leadership Forum and their public support for the IDF, inZOI has caught the ire of many simmers who find their partnership with CurseForge to be unaligned with their political beliefs. So I'll just say this on the topic: while it's important to vote with your wallet, so to speak, it's also worth reminding to be reasonable when it comes to expectations in this regard. By that I mean consumer activism, direct activism, all of this has a place. Ultimately, it'll be up to your awareness of socioeconomic climates to make final judgments, whether that be in games or anything else in life. But if you're going to hold inZOI to that high of a standard, then be mindful and demure, but sorry, that meme is like stuck in my head, but mostly mindful that any connections with CurseForge may lead to Overwolf's pockets. That can span from using their website to download and use mods, to even buying a single product from EA or beyond, as money flows all throughout a company. Sponsorships, partnerships, all money flows. To deny that is to just allow yourself to play your favorite games without feeling guilty. It is nearly impossible to track where your money ends up. That's why you have some folks out there who do the ultimate form of protest and decide to pay zero taxes to their respective government. I would go so far as to say I wouldn't put it past some Luddites out there who'd refuse to use smartphones, Google, and YouTube due to generative or algorithmic AI. Consumer protests can take all shapes and to many different extremes. Now, I say this not to discourage any one form of activism. Rather, I'd like to encourage you to not see inZOI's partnership with CurseForge as a co-signer of ultra-right Zionism. Rather, they are making a decision that they believe will help support their newly forming modding community. All in all, if you're going to hold yourself, this game, and their companies accountable, then you're probably uninterested in much of the aforementioned games. And if that's the case, none of this really matters. But if you're gonna do the mental gymnastics and try to jump hoops as to why supporting one brand of game is more conscious than the other, even if both are in clear partnership with CurseForge, then you're just gonna drive yourself mad. Be a good consumer, be thoughtful, be rational, and be nuanced in your beliefs. But please, don't paint with a broad stroke. That's all I'll say about this. We have heard that some players are already considering upgrading their PCs just to dive into the world of inZOI as soon as possible. It's clear that the game will require high specs, but can you share what the minimum system requirements might be? This answer, I feel, is not just telling, but again, I think reflects the criticism that inZOI has received. He responds, "It's true that inZOI currently requires high specs, but we've been working hard on optimization. We've been downgrading certain features of the Unreal 5 engine to ensure the game runs smoothly and that it looks great even on lower end systems. While Unreal Engine 5 delivers top-notch graphics quality, by lowering the quality of certain key rendering functions, we can make the game playable on specs lower than initially expected. Additionally, we're developing options that allow players to adjust elements like population density, vehicle count in-game, so they can tailor the experience to their PC's capabilities." This is great news, as it means more people will have access to try inZOI. In the long term, this might better help optimize the game, as there'll be fewer elements for the game to render. When I heard that they planned on a console release, I figured that this may have been a matter of time. To get a console release, one of the many requirements is a stable game that runs reliably on either the PS5 or Xbox Series X and hits the 60 FPS mark or more. While the downgrade seems to have been born out of the desire to appeal to more people, I don't think inZOI's graphics or visual staples, which we're now starting to see emerge, will drop in quality in a significant and or meaningful way. I think inZOI will still be one of the more visually stunning life sims out there, albeit with less rendering functionality across the board. That said, they are developing options to allow players to adjust population density, vehicle count, and I'm sure much more as this develops. I suspect we might get a launch similar to that of The Sims 3. The Sims 3 had an open world with some persistent elements happening in any given save. It was groundbreaking and broke some PCs along the way. I know from personal experience, having never being able to run the game at its high settings back in the day. The inZOI experience I feel may be similar. Many of us, including myself, will still have to play catch up when it comes to meeting the recommended PC specs for the best experience. I said this in my last video, but I also want to include this here. The minimum specs for inZOI, but moreover any game, is something you shouldn't strive for. Minimum specs are the bare minimum requirements needed to launch a game. There is no guarantee that the game will run smoothly, well, or even look the way you'd like on minimum specs. If you can help it, always strive for the recommended specs to experience the game the way the devs intended. Again, a general rule for all games, really. For me, inZOI's visuals are not a big selling point. I'm more interested in the gameplay and the potential that this live sim is offering. I suppose it does resonate with me a bit in terms of being able to finally make a character that best looks like me. Let's just say the character creators from Western game devs have not been too openly representative to folks like me, as is the nature of playing games, predominantly made with the Western default lens. I get that, lived with that my whole life. So, at the very least, inZOI is a breath of fresh air. Lastly, I struggle to believe that casting a wider net to appeal to a greater audience will allow inZOI to compete better with The Sims 4. I bring that up because I've been seeing the sentiment across social media that not appealing to a wider demographic due to their system requirements will be what keeps them from competing against The Sims 4. I think a lot of that rhetoric comes from a place of drawing similarities between inZOI and The Sims 4 for obvious reasons, but that said, I'm of the opinion that inZOI doesn't need to compete with The Sims 4 in order to have great success and staying power in the life sim genre. In fact, I think inZOI's success will primarily span from the curious or the disgruntled, disillusioned simmers to even those outside of their target demographic. It's very possible that they make a market of their own to carve out a piece of the pie, if you will. If true, I wouldn't put it past Life by You getting resurrected and Pair Lives becoming even more anticipated than before. Competition in the space, no matter how uneven, I think, will do the life sim genre good. As long as inZOI can build off the path of The Sims, Sims 2, and Sims 3, they will find success. At any rate, let's move on to the next question. Finally, as we approach early access launch of inZOI, could you share your hopes for the game and any message you'd like to convey to the players? He responds, inZOI is taking its first steps in creating a vast, immersive world. As a newcomer to developing this genre, and given the relatively short development period, there are still many areas that need improvement. However, I am genuinely passionate about this game and feel fortunate to be on this journey. Even if it takes me a bit more time, I'm confident we will deliver a polished, high-quality game in the end. Developing inZOI has led me to reflect deeply on life, drawing great comfort from the process. I hope that when you play inZOI, you'll be able to share in some of these experiences and find your own sense of connection and meaning within the game. Yo, that's like wholesome as hell. What the heck? No, but that's what I mean. Like, they are backed by a big company, but at the very least, at its helm, the lead developer is super grounded. They have that indie dev sort of spirit to them, which I just find so fascinating to me because they are not an indie dev team in many ways, again, backed by Krafton, but the dev team itself, has this mentality of being open, being vulnerable, being communicative, admitting to faults, working to improve things, working to develop things, taking innovative strides, challenging the status quo. inZOI and their team are working actively to not just be the same in terms of, the life sim genre, something that we're familiar with, but they're trying to be different in that they're being innovative and taking steps forward and also being open about where they see their game. And I don't know about you, I just feel comfort in that. At the same time, I always try to preach, be cynical in life. No, not in life. Be cynical when it comes to games or companies in general, okay? As much as I give them their flowers and praise them and say, inZOI, she's got it going on. For all I know, I want her for so long. I don't know why I'm trying to sing Stacy's mom, but I think the interview speaks volumes about the development team, but also about the visions for their game. I think from what we're coming to understand as more things are coming to light, that inZOI is on the right track and turning out to be the game that was promised for a lot of people. Perhaps not the game that was promised for a vast amount of people, and perhaps not a promised game that is going to outcompete The Sims 4. But in my humble, small channel opinion, it doesn't need to compete with The Sims 4 in order to be a juggernaut on its own. At any rate, I want to thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And if you'd like to see more inZOI content or inZOI updates, let me know in the comments below. But until then, I will see you then. You have a great freaking day. Seriously. If you're into coffee, get yourself a coffee. You deserve it. If you're into tea, have a sip of tea. Don't forget to take your breaks. Don't forget to keep hydrated wherever you are. But most of all, hit that like and subscribe. I'm kidding, I'm sorry.